Welcome. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you're all well. I'd like to acknowledge we're meeting tonight here on Kaurna land, and we'd also like to acknowledge elders of yesterday, today, and tomorrow. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Craig Wilkins. I'm the Chief Executive of the Conservation Council of South Australia, and I'll be your host this evening. This is part of a series of 7 different candidate webinars we are holding across the state, focusing on electorates, which we know will have a big impact on the state election in just over 2 weeks' time. South Australia has a proud history as a visionary, inclusive and innovative state. We've led the way on smart environmental policy, from container deposit legislation to the creation of marine parks. We are now showing the world how to successfully transform our energy system by transitioning away from coal, oil and gas and moving into clean solar, wind and other sources. We also know that Newland is an electorate that could well determine the result of this state election. So tonight we're keen to get a better sense of where each of you as candidates stand on a range of nature and climate issues of interest. So the format is we will have statements initially from each of you, and then questions that have been sent through before the forum as we've advertised this. And then any audience Q&As, questions that come through, any direct questions, and then time allowing, we'll have a hopefully some time for a short concluding statement. We're conscious the audience, the direct live audience is small tonight, but what we've found with these events is that there's a lot of interest post-event with the recordings. So we're really focused on getting you to be able to speak to your issues and your passions, and then we will share that information out to our thousands of members and supporters that live in the Newland electorate. And I say thousands because we've got across the 21 member groups and other partners who've been behind this initiative, they do reach over 100,000 South Australians. So I think I should now introduce our candidates for those in the audience. Tonight, we are delighted to have Adla Mattiske from the Greens, David Sherlock from the Animal Justice Party, and Francis Bedford, who's a proud independent. Unfortunately, we couldn't get either the Labor or Liberal candidate, but I think it is their loss rather than ours. So with that beginning, I will perhaps start with, I'll actually introduce the candidates in the order they're on the ballot paper. So, and I'll ask you to just begin by introducing yourself and giving a short statement about the issues around nature and climate that are important to you. So about sort of 3-4 minutes would be awesome. So I'll start with you, Adla.
Thanks. I just want to acknowledge that we're on Kaurna land, and I'm really proud to live and work on Kaurna land, and I acknowledge leaders past, present and emerging. So I'm the Greens candidate, and I'm an educator. So I see that schools are a really good place to start sustainability, and that there's lots of opportunity there to do that. I work with young people, and I want them to have a vision full of hope, a future full of hope. And I'm a mum as well, so I think about the future for my children and what that means for them, and I look back from when I was a child to now, and I can see that things have changed and not for the better. So I want to make sure that there's lots of opportunities for young people. I'm really passionate about everyday people being able to influence change, and we need to hear more from educators, nurses, and less from career politicians. Everyone has a voice, and we need to use that voice to make the change that we need. The state election is our opportunity to put those in power on notice and to put climate at the centre of what we're talking about. We know that we need to move away from fossil fuels and renewables, and we know there's lots of things that the Greens have in plan for that: electrification of the public transport system and putting planning back into people's hands and really putting a focus on protecting our beautiful trees. We know that there's overdevelopment, and the development is in lots of areas, which is agricultural land, and we know that the planning for housing doesn't always include the infrastructure to support sustainable housing. So they're things that I'm passionate about. At the moment, we have a health crisis, a housing crisis, and a climate crisis, and we know that we can fix these things together if we're brave enough to move forward.
Great. Thanks, Adla. Over to you, David, your intro statement.
Hey, so I also want to acknowledge that I'm speaking from Ghana land, and I'd like to acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. The three most important words to the AJP, at least, and myself, are animals, people, and planet. And as a political party, generally we exist to sort of raise the profile of all animals in Parliament, give them a voice, household pets, marine life, endangered species, and even some of the sort of neglected, less desirable ones that people don't want to talk about. We see them all as relevant and worthy of life. Within this, though, there's an important truth that it sometimes gets glanced over, and that's that without a habitat, there's no species. And when we take this to its fullest conclusion, without a habitable Earth, there's no humans. And so, like, while I get that that is a massive statement, and with something of that magnitude, there is wiggle room and area to contest, I still think it's true. And if we look at sort of the most recent IPCC report, in some ways, we're not just staring down the barrel of climate change, but we're starting to see it already. It's not only real, but like it's here, we're living it, and it's already causing massive damage. In that same IPCC report, tells us that taking action now can secure our future. And it says if we make the right changes now, then we can look back, 30, 40 years within our lifetime, watching our grandchildren, our children, and we can just say, oh, wow, what a horrible few years that start of the 20s was. And the second, and I think probably the most relevant to this forum, is that in that report, it says that safeguarding and strengthening nature is the key to most of these changes that we need. Finally, and the one part of the report that fills me with a little bit of dread is urgent action is required, and that's right now. And to some extent, the small measures that we're taking and the easy victories that we get, they're only going to do so much. I don't know whether setting targets, trying to appease everyone, will actually guide us through this climate emergency. So I think strong policy with a clear target, backed by science and geared towards the rehabilitation and reunification of animals, people, and the planet is the only way forward. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, David. And Francis, over to you. Oh, I think you're on mute.
That's it. I've done it now. I'm on a little screen, so it's my fault. Thank you. And it's terrific that we've all acknowledged Ghana land, and I'd just like to add to everybody else's acknowledgement that I've always considered Aboriginal people traditional owners of and custodians of the land, sea and sky, and that's so important for us when we're talking about conservation and nature here tonight. Well, I guess I've had a very long-standing interest in all sorts of things related to the sorts of issues that we're talking about tonight. And I actually am old enough to remember container deposit legislation being introduced and being very excited about one of Don Dunson's greatest things. And while it's great to see that happen, it's really important that and I don't understand why it took so long for other states to get moving, but that's another story. The removal of plastics and the reduction of waste. So we all see so much packaging on so many things in supermarkets. And I think one of the things we need to try and do really quickly is work out a way to reduce some of that and extend CDL to bottles like glass and start a move on that very, very soon. Sustainable housing things, I think that's I can't understand why we still don't use light coloured bricks and roofing and have the orientation of the buildings. And I had a great interest. I don't know if you remember, Paul Downton had a sustainable development in the city in Sturt Street. And I must admit, I took my eye off the ball there and I haven't been in touch with him for a while and haven't been able to find him. But they had so many wonderful initiatives with mud bricks and straws. And that, I know that was really, really a positive and wonderful thing. Public transport, hugely important. Out here, I'm trying to organise a cross-suburban link between Tea Tree Plaza and Mawson Lakes with a rapid bus that stops at Ingle Farm, which becomes a hub, using the old Mats corridor. It's be fair to say that the Salisbury Council have not very interested and would rather whack up 90 dwellings there. And we all know what 90 dwellings brings with it: cars and urban landfill, blah, blah, blah. And the only way into that area is through two minor streets, and they're going to fix transport and egress into those areas somehow, but they can't do it yet. So they're huge issues for me in this particular area, connecting Tea Tree Plaza with all the jobs to the west, all the industrial, military and jobs that further out at Port Adelaide. We need to work that out. Significant trees. As someone who's been in a member of parliament for a long time, I've had a lot of significant tree issues. We really have to work out some way of making sure that it's harder to remove trees, and that anything's removed is replaced tenfold, and that developers are forced to have some sort of payment up front so they don't get away with blue murder while they're doing things. Very interested in traditional land management practice, Indigenous practices, and I've often spoken with Uncle Lewis and others about the climate of South Australia and how the removal of trees throughout the northern parts of the state saw the land become much, much drier. So there's an enormous lot of things we can do about that. I've asked a million questions on cuttlefish and dolphins over the years, much to everyone's horror. And I'm a long-standing member of many of your collaborator groups, although it would be fair to say I haven't been terribly active in the conservation area, but I've always had an ear to it. And as someone who was a member of the Hills Space Zone group out here at Tea Tree Gully, in that period, we worked very hard to maintain the Hills Space Zone through a planning initiative all those years ago. So keen to be upfront and more involved with conservation and all the things that go with that at a local level, which feed into climate change action.
Fantastic. Thank you, Frances. So going into a bit more detail, because it's lovely that you've all talked about many of the issues we're keen to explore tonight. So let's start unpacking them even more. So the first question we've got, which is definitely around climate, and which is not a surprise. So certainly in the last few days, the nature of the climate emergency has been starkly laid bare. So we've had this latest IPCC report released with an incredibly blunt message that our small window to prevent climate catastrophe is closing rapidly. And on the ground, we have seen almost biblical flooding across the eastern states. And yet we've only just been in recent memory hit by horrendous bushfires. So the question for each of you is, if elected, what practical actions will you or your party take on climate action to ensure that South Australia plays its part in creating a safe and healthy future for our families and each other? So I might start with you this time, David, and then go to Frances and then Adla.
Thanks, Craig. So it's very hard for me and my party to talk about climate change without talking about animal agriculture. It's look, 53% approximately of South Australia is farmed. It's agricultural land, and of that, approximately sort of half would be dedicated to animal agriculture, which obviously in these situations, numbers vary between sort of animal advocates and farming advocates as to exactly what sort of emissions they're creating. But worldwide, we know that they are the #1 polluter, tends to hit around 10 to 15% of all sort of methane gases that are released into the atmosphere are as a result of the animal agriculture and the direct agriculture. Animal advocates put it somewhere around 50% when we take into account land clearing, methane production, transport of these things. The Animal Justice Party would like to significantly reduce our reliance upon animal agriculture. This means putting money into plant-based meats. It means education to get people away from and to see different options for their plates. Moving on from that, we have a current recommendation that natural gas be rapidly phased out. Sort of 15 to 20 years is our definition of rapidly. It would be nice if that could be sooner, but living in reality, we need to accept that there are real workers and real people that operate within these industries, and we have to find equitable ways to retrain, to move them on without negatively impacting their lives, their families, obviously we'd be negatively impacting their job, but not in a way that doesn't retrain them and reskill them and work towards other areas. That's our main sort of approach to look. Yeah, I'm going to leave it at that. And it's when we deal with animal agriculture, that is our main culprit. That brings down so much. We have things in line that we'd like to talk to you about, reducing traffic, public transport. Yeah, if it reduces carbon, we're probably interested in it, especially if it reduces carbon while minimizing loss of animal life and loss of animal habitat. But main one that will have the most impact immediately, animal agriculture every time. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Over to you, Francis. What will you push for if elected in terms of practical action? Oh, and I think you're mute again.
Here we go. Need to declare up front that I'm a card-carrying member of the Meat Workers Union, which doesn't augur well for me, but I don't think any of us missed the announcement that Thomas Foods is being given a large amount of money to look into plant-based protein. And I was horrified when the meat workers told me that there'd be no meat in 30 years, but I think that's obviously going to have to be the way we go. And I'm sure David and everybody who's concerned about animal welfare, if we had to kill our own meat, we wouldn't eat meat, let's be honest, and no one would eat a whole beast anyway, so that's a really big issue. But I think that's going to be the way we're going to have to look, and to look at what each of us can do. I know in my youth, we used to have a steak the size of a plate. Now I eat very small portions of meat, not that makes it any better or different, but and the price of meat will price it out of most people's grasp anyway. I think the other thing that we need to look at is the stopping of land clearing, and that's something we can all have a bit of an impact on, particularly with the federal election coming up. I know I couldn't believe my eyes or my ears when I heard the timber workers in Tasmania were, going to support the Liberal government years ago because they were going to continue the old growth harvesting, which was just horrible. No more gas appliances. I think that's something that we have to really consider. I know I've got a home with gas and electricity. In the days when it wasn't really something we thought about, it was because if there was a power strike, I could still cook. But I think as we look at better ways of producing and storing solar power, that will be a thing of the past as well. The other thing I was going to talk about was transitions. I think David made a really important point. Transitions anywhere are the real key to it, because as we've seen in the coal industry, if there's no other option, the people involved in coal are going to galvanize the power that they have and use that lobbying to keep the focus on production of coal, when the real thing we should be doing is looking at ways to sustain the transition for them so that they're part of the new industry. And I think something that we saw here when Holden's went, where a lot of workers were given a lot of support. And it's something that we should be planning for and already talking about it in a really meaningful way. But and that comes from leadership, which we don't have, unfortunately, at the federal level. But we can always do things here at home and start talking about those things here. At the local level, though, we need to certainly be talking about reduction of waste and improve recycling, and start talking about people understanding that plant-based protein is the way that we're going to be going. And that gets back to farmers having a transition plan as well, because there are a lot of people involved in agricultural production that will be wondering what they're doing. So we have to start looking at that straight away.
Great. Thanks, Frances. Adla, your thoughts about the immediate actions that we should be taking around climate?
So the Greens are the only party campaigning for climate action, and we've got a strong track record there. And part of moving forward is actually making the big polluters pay their fair share, and also looking at our democracy and who's donating to our political parties and how much influence are they having. So I think we need to really look at making our democracy fairer. Our state's led the way in a number of ways. Frances mentioned the can and bottle deposit, and we were first with the green bags, but we need to lead the way again. We've kind of fallen behind. We should have a plan to transition towards the electrification of rails, trams and buses, and also making sure our renewable energy can be stored. So that might be wind, it might be solar, there's other options as well. We know that we're feeling climate change. You mentioned the floods before. We know there's bushfires. Climate change is also a health issue. I have a good friend who's a GP, and respiratory issues, heat waves. So, it's not just we see it around us, but people are feeling it in their bodies as well. So we know that we need to make change. We've all mentioned eating less meat and looking at agriculture as a really big polluter. Transport is another really big polluter, and so looking at overland rail for transport, reducing freight trucks, that also takes pressure off of our roads. So a lot of things these days are we build roads to put more cars on the roads, and we need to be really clear about that, transitioning away from internal combustion engines and having electric charging ports in public places for people to use, and having that infrastructure, which we don't have. Definitely eating less meat, eating beef. It has the highest it releases the highest amount of carbon in terms of what's needed to produce that. So even if people cut that out of their diet, if they're not able to go vegan right away, they can make an immediate change. Regenerative farming is another one where, looking at how farmers can use their land in a different way, and looking at what can they use, sowing other things at the same time, and using the feces from the cattle to fertilize, and really thinking about doing things differently. And they're excellent success stories. Also looking at our use of plastic. We know that plastic is just everywhere. It's in everything we do. There needs to be rules about that, and I would personally like to see products listed how much of virgin plastic is in the product. That would make it really clear for people to say, this has got 100% virgin plastic. I'm happy to pay a little bit more for this product. Of course, opening up our container reuse schemes. And last year, the state government banned single-use plastics, but that hasn't gone far enough, and it will go further. And obviously with COVID, there's a lot of single-use plastics. I work in a school. We give students masks every day. So there's a health component, but we are also part of a trial to recycle those things. So sometimes we need to stop and do things a little bit slower and a little bit longer. So it takes longer for us to recycle those masks, but it's really important. So I think we also need to put pressure on businesses to be part of the change. And I know that some big businesses are really happy to be part of that change.
Great, thanks, Adla. Another issue which is certainly occupying a lot of our time, and is definitely an issue in Newland, is the loss of significant regulated trees. In fact, we expect there'll be quite a large story in tomorrow's paper which will reveal that tree loss in Adelaide is far greater than previously understood, with some suburbs well above 10% loss over the last decade, which is extraordinary because there is state government targets for a significant increase in tree canopy cover. We know trees provide an enormous benefit in terms of people's health, mental health, keeping the city cool, and yet we are cutting them down. So we're really keen to get a sense of what candidates will advocate for law reform to try and turn this around, because that is what we think needs to make it, that will be the biggest difference, particularly on private land. So I'm keen to get the views of each of you about what you think is should happen around increasing protection for large trees in Adelaide. So starting with you, Adla.
Thanks, Craig. Yeah, it's quite shocking. According to the Conservation Council, South Australia has lost over 70,000 mature trees per year, and that's the equivalent of 1,000 Adelaide Oval. So that's really scary when you think about it, when you visualise it like that. The Greens are committed to better tree protection laws, and of course, if we're looking at tree protection, we have to look at our planning. That those two are often going hand in hand, and it's really sad that our state has the weakest tree protection laws in the country. So that's something that the Greens are committed to improving, because we know that our trees need protection. You've mentioned the mental health benefits. Obviously, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, but failing that, there are ways we can do that today. So I think linking in with private business owners, but also looking at whenever there's a development, having tree planting offsets with that, and also looking at our transport corridors to improve our tree canopy. And I have a friend who works in council, and I know that looking at ways to capture the water to slowly water them is really important as well. And we really actually just need to stop cutting them down, and we probably need to be more creative with where we're putting roads. And I think sometimes it's a matter of just putting the trees first and maybe the road second, and working it out, because we're always putting cars in front of people, in front of trees, and I think we need to change that. It really comes down to planning, and it's time for people to have a genuine say in planning and participation in that. So the Greens are committed to better planning laws as well, because that will help strengthen the tree protection. Thanks.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Adla. David, your thoughts on this one?
Well, my initial thought, the AJP considers land clearing in its entirety to be an environmental and an animal welfare disaster. I think we have enough roads. I don't know if we have enough trees. I think we need not only to protect what we have, but we need to look at rewilding and reforesting a lot of areas. If we look at Newland, actually went to meet Adla the other day, and apart from having a lovely chat with her, was riding through a lot of, I'm a cyclist, so I was sort of riding along, and so many lovely parks around the area. It is a green, well, actually, a little bit of background information. I actually originally come from Melbourne, so to me, Adelaide as a whole is a very green area. And I think it would be horrible for us to lose that at this point. And specifically Newland with its ring of, can I use the word trees again? I feel like I'm going to have to use the word trees again. No, but look, parks and habitats, they're important to us. And if we go back way back to AJP policy, it is about coexisting with nature and with animals. And I think we've kind of taken enough from nature for ourselves at the moment. When we need to build more, we should build more, but I don't think we currently need to. And I think we would really want to assess any reason to cut down a tree voraciously, and I'd probably oppose it. Like, more, you'd have to have a really good reason, I'll put it that way. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, David. It's interesting when you look across Australia in terms of tree canopy and public space for that. Melbourne actually has more public open areas with trees than Adelaide. Adelaide has traditionally had more canopy in private land, but that's where a lot of the tree loss is occurring. So, and that's part of the reason why we're so concerned, is there simply isn't enough public land to compensate and replant all what we're losing on private land. So we are rapidly becoming like those larger cities interstate in terms of sprawl without decent tree canopy cover. Frances, your thoughts on this one?
Right. Oh, goodness only knows. I'm back in the right. The thing that that I've noticed is the difference between Florrie, my old seed, which when I had it, went down to Northfield, Paracrinkle Farm. And when you come up to Newland and the top end of Newland where the hills face zone sort of joins the suburbs, it's like another planet altogether. So part of what's happened, I think, is when developers started work in setting up these suburbs, there wasn't much not much conscious effort on encouraging people to plant trees. So by the time I got to live in Modbury Heights, which is where I am, in a war service homes development, which was on vineyard. And I can remember when I first came here, there was still vineyard across the road, and I walked the dogs up the end towards Grenfell Road, and there was a man on a horse with a rifle who warned me off his property, not that I was going on it anyway. And that's within my living memory of 40 years. But the interesting thing was that the council gave us all 10 trees to plant. And that's why there are so many candle pines and phoenix palm trees in our area, because that was two of the varieties that there were diosmas and other sorts of things. But that's the sort of thing that we need to encourage more now, that any development, or it doesn't even matter, have to be a development, any existing ratepayer is encouraged to plant 5 or 10 things a year. And where we might have community gardens that are doing vegetables and other good things, I think we should come together and have community groups that plant trees in large quantities. I mean, I've been involved with the Friends of Dry Creek. We plant, dozens and dozens of things down along the linear parks and the creek beds and all the rest of it. So we need to see more of that happening, not just once or twice a year, but more often than that. It's interesting, I should let you know, late last year, I had an intern do a project for me, which was trying to balance the interests of significant and regulated trees and landowners in the Florrie electoral district. Now, this young man produced a great paper, which I can make available to you, and some of the things he came to in his conclusions, which unfortunately I haven't done anything with because I only got it sort of in November, December, and it's got swallowed up in the campaign. But he was talking about all sorts of really interesting things, like a green factor program that could be adopted for incentives in new developments, a mature tree replacement program, a program where constituents are encouraged to increase their permeable spaces by adopting their verge and planting trees. But not a lot of people don't look after their verge. Like the council tree goes in, and unless that truck comes past and waters it, it's on its own. It's a bit like and a worry. And as Adla said, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. And my kids went to the Heights school, and I don't know how many times we replanted trees. And because they were vandalised, we stopped. So there's about 15 significant trees, but we have to keep that effort going in all the time. So David's talking about the green area up the top end of the electorate, but down the bottom end we still need a lot to do, like Ridgehaven along the creek bed. That's lovely, but there are other parts where there's not much. When you look at the skyline, there are very few big trees above the top of the houses, and I think that's a sadness. So we really need to have a significant community effort, and I'm happy, as I said, to supply you with this paper, which I thought was really good. So that's that, I think.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Frances. Yeah, we'll really be interested to have a look at the paper.
Sure.
Next theme I'd love to explore is around transport. It's absolutely essential in terms of our lives, in terms of our mobility, our social connection, our health, but also we know that transport is not only the largest, it's actually the fastest growing area of the state's greenhouse gas emissions. So we're really interested in finding out more from candidates about what they would like to do about it. So keen to find out from you about your plans around reducing emissions of transport, in particular through public transport, through walking and cycling, so active transport, and electrification of vehicles. Francis, you mentioned around the cross-suburban link, and would really be interested to find out a bit more about that. And perhaps I'll start with you, Francis, about your thoughts about transport.
Well, when we took on Paraka Ingle Farm and started to look at the needs of those suburbs, because they've been in a safe Labor seat for decades, they get nothing, basically. But it was pretty obvious to us that transport was a big problem. You can't actually get from one side of the old Flory, which is Modbury, to the other side. You just can't do it. You've got to catch buses up and down and back and whatnot. And that just means it's too hard to catch public transport, so people take their cars. Thoroughly agree with all of you. All this money for road infrastructure, it's nuts. It's nuts. I mean, what's it satisfying really, except it's massive job creation. And while that's a good thing, I'm not saying, job creation is not a good thing, but we must be able to think of other things. Like, I'd like to see some of that money peeled off immediately and used for social housing, and that creates jobs too, just different jobs. So we looked at transport, and we looked at the old Mats corridor. None of you would probably remember the trauma we went through acquiring all that land in the 70s. Now, we lost all of that down south, which meant all the pain we're going through down south. If we'd kept that land, we wouldn't be going through that pain now. We wouldn't be talking about underground tunnels and all the other carry on. And so to us, it seemed the best idea was a rapid bus between the O-Bahn, which is, everyone fates it as a wonderful thing, but it's still one of only 2 active O-Bahns in the whole world. So you've got to ask yourself what people know or don't know about it. But we wanted to link Tea Tree Plaza Modbury interchange to Mawson Lakes Railhead. And that way we'd all be able to move around the entire Adelaide, Gawler to Seacliff and across back to Glenelg, the city, not only just for peak commutes, but for seniors as well, who, as you said, transport's about being able to participate in society and getting people out and about. And we thought, well, by using a rapid bus along Montague Road to Ingle Farm and turning that into a hub, that's where we build the 2- and 3-story, dense housing. It's not going to cause any trouble. And then use that Mats corridor as a linear park through to the Mawson Lakes Railhead. Be fair to say, Salisbury Council aren't terribly interested, but that doesn't mean we can't make them interested. They actually said to me, I'm the only one who's ever suggested that. And I said, well, that can't be true if it's a Mats corridor, can it? But anyway, I let them go on that. But we've got to make public transport frequency worthwhile and the connectivity of it worthwhile. So if you got a hub to Ingle Farm's only 14 minutes from the city in a straight line. So I think we have to do lots more. The park and rides that go with the O-Bahn are a big issue out here for us, particularly as the second park and ride we were promised at Modbury was taken from the seat of Newland and given to the seat of King, which is also marginal, which meant we've still got traffic everywhere parked in side streets. And our big issue is where the old TAFE building is, which is now Datacom. There are 1,000 workers there who park cars in that little car park out the back, which is about to be turned into the second park and ride. So we need to look at ways to sort that out. I think the other point that I think Adla made, which is really true, the transportation of food and other things, like why are we moving strawberries from Queensland down to Adelaide, where we grow heaps of strawberries? Seasonal eating and those sorts of things I think are really important too, to look at ways to reduce the reliance on the transport. And as we've seen in the floods, if the trucks don't get through, well, nothing happens. But even more closer to home, we've seen on the APY lands, you just can't get fresh fruit and vegetables there for some reason. And yet we can fly a tulip from Amsterdam and have it in the flower markets overnight in Sydney. So you've really got to ask your questions about priorities and what we think are important. And without that access to fresh fruit and vegetables, the diet in the far north is very, very depleted. But certainly got to do more about cars, electric vehicles, all those sorts of things. So I think everyone agrees with that.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Francis. Adla, your thoughts?
Thanks. So the Greens are one of our policy platforms is free public transport, because we recognise that sometimes cost is a prohibitor, and if we make it free, people will use it more. And one of the arguments against using public transport is that it doesn't run very often, so we want to invest in it. I'm really lucky. I have a great bus stop just up the road within 500 metres. Not everyone has that. Francis mentioned park and rides, and in Newland they're seen as a solution, and I feel a little bit sad about that, because people are still driving their car to catch a bus, and I would like to see, as the Greens, with free public transport, we can invest in that, making it electric, regular buses, making sure that there are services that go further. Some people will always need to drive to a park and ride because they're dropping off their children on the way. Obviously looking at electrification of vehicles, but I want to talk about active transport. And I started riding a bike a little while ago, and I stopped because I felt really unsafe. So in terms of bus lanes, they stop abruptly. They're full of debris, and I know, and sometimes drivers are actually plain nasty. So I think we need to look at where are the bike lanes and how to make them safer so more people are using them. And I was really happy a few years ago when they changed the law so that people can ride on the footpath, which is great, but that can be quite scary if you are a pedestrian on the footpath and a bike goes past. So I think we really need to look at the design of bike paths and how they're integrated with the road. We're really lucky in Newland. We've got Nancy's Conservation Park with beautiful walking trails and some pretty steep inclines, actually. So we've got some hilly terrain around the area here, but not all of our paths are integrated. So it's actually a matter of just linking them up. And if you wanted to get from the top of Newland to the city, you'd have to stop and join several paths along the way. So it's about that connectivity and looking at getting the bikes and the people off the road. I live in a street that's the houses were built in the 60s. We got a footpath 2 years ago. So really looking at active transport, but usable active transport. The footpath out the front of our house is quite steep and undulating, so people still walk on the road. So I think really assessing just putting a footpath in doesn't make it usable. So really looking at active transport as a way for us to reduce our emissions and get people out. And what's nice about active transport is that you're out in the community and you have the opportunity to talk with other people as well.
Great, thanks, Adla. And David, your thoughts about public transport and active transport?
I'm going to actually just stop for 1 second. I'll get to that in 20 seconds or so. I just wanted to thank everyone taking part. So far, every answer has been very concise, quite forward thinking, and just it leaves me with a lot of hope. You're all doing rad work. But I'm gonna with much love and respect, Adla, take one issue to one thing that you said, and that's just about the footpaths and cycling. When I first started cycling, I loved footpaths and cycling until I realized that cars pulling out of their driveways, you have no reaction time to them. And the first 2 times I got hit by a car was from a car pulling out of their driveway while I thought I was safe on the footpath. Wow. I do absolutely like the fact that riding on the footpath is legal, but just as a sort of community statement, please, if you're riding on the footpath, ride slowly and realize that you do not have time to react to a car pulling out of their driveway. Anyway, moving on. You might have gotten the idea that I'm very into active transport. Also, before I was a cyclist, I walked and I caught trains, and because a lot of this time was in Melbourne, I caught trams everywhere. I used this time to read my books. I used this time to read the news on my phone. And when I was working a job that started way too early in the morning, I used this time to catch up on some of the sleep I had to lose by getting up to get to work. I am so supportive and behind all of these initiatives. The AJP as a party are also behind these initiatives. We'd love to see almost like a cease in the expansion and widening of road networks. It destroys ecosystems, and what it does outside of that is just encourage urban sprawl and car-dependent communities. And we don't want to see these, not only from an animal protection point of view, but also from a pollution point of view, and also from a public health point of view. That sometimes walking and riding isn't feasible for people who are not physically able, and we cannot leave them behind in this conversation. But where you are physically able, walking and riding is a fantastic way to improve. I say this as a personal trainer. It's a fantastic way to improve your health. It creates incidental exercise that is going to do great things for your blood pressure. It's going to do great things to keep you out of, well, what is currently an overstacked public hospital system. It is the way to go about life, and I love it immensely. We do need to keep public transport affordable. It is when I first moved to Adelaide, it was very cheap and accessible, and it is starting to move up and up and up to the point where you put $10 on your card, and suddenly, after a round trip, you need to top up again. And that's, you know, some people don't have that money for traveling, and are we to deny them travel when I refuse to believe that our state's budget means we cannot provide this service for people when we're providing other services. That's outside of the AJP policy. So I'm not making any election promises on that whatsoever. But from a personal point of view, free public transport is it's a public service. Like it's the only way I feel we should go. No promises though. We want to see steep reductions in private vehicles. So I could probably convince them, but anyway, yep. Anyway, I'm just going to shut up now before I get kicked out of the party. Thanks, guys.
We don't want that. So great. I noticed that there has been a question that's come through previously around the impact of agriculture animal agriculture on the environment. We have touched on this a bit, but there's actually a specific animal welfare question I'd love to get your views on, and that's duck and quail hunting. It's been a long-running debate in South Australia. We're one of the last 2 states in the country that allows duck and quail hunting, and really keen to get each of your views about where you would stand if it ever came before Parliament. So I might start with you, David. I probably can guess what you'll say, but please, your views, thought first.
Do I need any more words than ban it? It's abhorrent. It is outdated, and I cannot conceive why anyone would want to spend their time killing an innocent creature for the fun of it. And yeah, I look, I don't need to say anything more than that, but when I was a young kid, I played Duck Hunt on the Nintendo. I don't know, you guys might know that, you might not know that. Video games have come a long way since then. Just pick up a VR system and go shoot anything to your heart's content, and just don't hurt things while you're doing it. It needs to be banned, and it needed to be banned 20 years ago. I'm sorry, it's horrible and horrific.
Thanks, David. Francis, what are your thoughts? Oh, you're on mute.
That better? I've been opposing duck hunting in the Labor Party conferences forever. We were involved in the banning of lead shot and all that. I mean, I just don't get it. I really don't get shooting. But we all know how powerful the gun lobby is, even though we mightn't think it's a lobby here in Australia. It's around. Again, I should declare my son-in-law is a paintball gun thingo person, and while they could do all of that, maybe that saved a lot of ducks. But I just don't understand duck shooting, and I'm with David, ban it altogether. But I'd also be banning video game shooting things as well, so I'm not sure I'm the right person. But that other photo we saw this week of the spearfisher people coming out of the ocean, that was a bit scary, I thought. That's fraught with danger. I'm not sure which person thought that was a great idea, but there it goes. Just wanted to hark back a bit on buses. The private contracts of buses is our big problem, and we need to do something about that. But yeah, ban duck shooting, horrible.
Mm.
And
Yeah,
yet, I think maybe the killing of feral animals is a better way to go, like wild pigs and stuff. What do the others think about that? I mean, David, are we allowed to shoot feral pigs, do you think, or how do we look after that? Because they're causing great havoc on the land.
Yeah, over to you, David. What are your thoughts around that?
There are far more humane ways to deal with species that have been introduced through no fault of their own into habitats that they don't want to be than just going out and willfully killing them all. It is obviously a very, very big topic, and there are murky areas into it. But as a party and a person, I feel like until we've exhausted every option that doesn't involve killing an animal for no particular reason except their bad luck, I can't get behind that one entirely, Francis. I'm sorry.
So what
but
about
I do.
Feral cats and things?
Feral cats are still deserving of life. There are we as a party and myself, certainly let's look into ways to stop them from breeding.
Okay.
Let's look into many ways to negate their impact upon habitats. 100% behind that. But if we can do that in a way that doesn't cost them their lives, 110% behind that.
All right. Adla, so duck hunting in particular, but other animal welfare issues?
So duck hunting is abhorrent, and the Greens are committed to ending that. And I know Tammy Franks has been running a campaign for several years raising public awareness, because many people in the community actually aren't aware that duck hunting is legal. So that's definitely something we're committed to ending. In terms of, I'd like to talk about renters and animal rights. That's another area that we've been working on as a party, and making it so that renters are allowed to have animals, because there's so many animals that are surrendered when people are trying to find housing and they're forced to give up their animals. So we're really looking at strengthening those renters' rights to protect animals. That's quite a big issue. We're committed to looking after the rights of animals, and we can see that through the policies that we have. And definitely another thing that Tammy's looking at doing is capping the number of domestic pets that are actually bred, and keeping a record of that, because we know that there are lots of animals being bred each year, and banning puppy farming is one thing, but actually keeping a track of the number of animals and putting a cap on it, so that the animals that are already in existence and might be in welfare, I can't think, they've been surrendered, giving them a home first before we're breeding new animals.
Thanks, Adla. Another issue which is coming across strongly across all the metro electorates we've been talking to is the impact of the planning and design code, which has been part of a large-scale planning reform process, which was kicked off by the previous Labor government and has been extended through the current Marshall government. A range of concerns we have around the impact in terms of climate, in terms of water, in terms of heritage, in terms of community participation. We're really keen to see some sort of review into the planning design code, and a fresh look at making sure we design our cities better for the future. Keen for your thoughts whether you would support such a review into the planning design code. I'll start with you, Francis.
Oh, mammothly. Hugely has to happen, and sooner rather than later. It's become apparent to me, the first people who started to call me were people in Campbelltown, and we've seen huge infill in Paraka and Ingle Farm because of their cheap buy-in price. And even here locally, there was one house on the corner of Wright Road and Nelson Road where they knocked it down, one house down, and built 6. That's the worst example I've ever seen. But we have to do something about planning, if the only reason is they don't want cars parked on the street, because every house now has 2 cars and there's never enough room for the 2 cars on the property. So that to me explains the fact that we're putting too many houses in the urban infill program. We've done a lot of work with Fran Boehm and her institute at Flinders, which is now somewhere else, having had the coup up there, because I think her group have done some amazing work, and we used their work when we were looking at the Ingle Farm Paraka better livability in suburbs things. So we think we should give a lot more voice to those sorts of programs, which takes into things like cycling and active transport. I mean, I walk everywhere, but I can't carry all the junk I have to carry into town and Parliament. So it's sort of, I tried for a while to catch public transport, but it just didn't work for me. But the other big problem, of course, is having single people in a car and not carpooling a lot more where we can. But the design, planning and design, just a disaster, which unfortunately sits firmly at the feet of Labor and John Rao. And Prospect Road, I think, is pretty sad when I go down there now, rather than looking on it as being wonderful. But that gets back to the fact, and someone was talking to me about this the other day. I know the first place I ever rented was a bed sit in Kensington. And there was like six little units on a block, and we shared a laundry. I mean, we all survived. I mean, that wasn't a big issue. The other thing I have is a lot of older women who are now alone in big houses, but need some way to be able to do the work that demolishes the two houses, builds two properties on the one thing that adjoins in a common area. And I even, I talk to people about taking in boarders, for instance. I mean, that's not going to suit everybody, but the social housing crisis means we have to start looking at ways to accommodate people, because I just don't accept if you have a car, you're not at risk. You can sleep in your car. And so we have to look at ways to make planning and design more responsive to the needs of the society that we're actually living, the community we're living in now.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Frances. Adla, your thoughts?
Yeah, definitely planning is something that needs to be addressed, and we want, one of our policy platforms is putting people back into planning, and we've also want to make developers pay their fair share. At the moment, someone can buy a block of land and knock it down and then sell it for 12 houses, and there's actually they make a lot of money from that. And in some of the eastern states, there's been some rules that are put in that mean that the status of the land changes, and so they're paying more tax. So we would like to look at that, so that actually developers are paying their share. Personally, in Newland, so I live in an area with CWMS, which is an archaic septic system, and we're seeing houses knocked down, and 3 or 4 are going up onto aging infrastructure that's known to be failing and having sewerage seeping into the street. So that's a prime example of developers being able to put houses in areas where there's no infrastructure to support it. So I think we really need to look at how are these things being approved. And we know that John Rao really adjusted the planning laws, and they're not for the good of the people, but they are for the good of the developers. So we really need to put people back into planning and look at sustainable solutions. And I'm not opposed to urban infill. I think we have to do it thoughtfully though, and look at things like thermal walls. And Frances mentioned that houses have 2 cars. If we make our public transport system better, then that reliance on cars should go. And I actually think that many houses have 3 or 4 cars, and they use their garages as a bedroom, and so they're parking in the street. So I think we also need to look at public housing and making that affordable and accessible for people. So definitely we support reforms to planning laws.
Thanks, Adla. David, what's the view of the AJP?
I speak from a household with 0 cars, 2 people, both cyclists. I also speak from a household that has houses going up left, right, and center. I think on my street there's 6 new developments. It's crazy. We got people building every day. Every house looks the same, probably made from cheap materials. They're not built to last. I'm in an old council house that's very much built to last. We, as the AJP, have, outside of, as long as we're not clearing habitats to create this space, this one works a little bit outside of our policies and positions. But we do believe that people have a right to houses. And as Adelaide grows and gets bigger, these things will need to be looked at. My biggest concern is a concern that Adla raised, and it is just simply who wins here. Is it the developers making shoddy houses, selling them off? As Look, when I moved to Adelaide, one of the main reasons that I moved here was because there was no way I was ever going to afford a home in Melbourne. Like, my wife has family here, and there were some things going on that led us to the decision to move back to Adelaide. But at the end of the day, we were paying, $500 a week rent to live in a crap house. And we're looking at Adelaide going, so we could live in a house that's 3 times as good as that for $150 less. When I purchased land in Adelaide, without sort of bringing up how much I bought it for, it was a reasonable price for a house. And now we find some of my best friends about a year behind. They're struggling greatly to find any property that they can afford. Adelaide is in a housing crisis, and that needs to get fixed. Its biggest draw card is that it is a relaxed place with a great pace of life. Everyone here is so lovely. The food's great. It is a great place to live, but it's not going to be a great place to live if people can't live here. That needs to be balanced with crap eyesore houses, poorly planned houses, and we need responsible infrastructure around these houses. Outside of that, I will admit that this one is beyond mine and the AJP's sort of area of grave concern, but I will always vote with what is the best for people, the planet, and the animals. And so long as the houses aren't negatively affecting any of those three, and I'll probably always vote against developer interests if the interest is in the common man, because they're my guys and girls for that matter.
Thanks, David. So coming up towards the end, I thought I'd ask a couple of quick questions about broader state issues, and totally understand if you don't have a firm view around them, or your party doesn't have a firm view, but I thought I'd just touch in. The first is about the proposal for a nuclear waste facility at Kimber in the Eyre Peninsula. So the idea is to shift nuclear waste from Lucas Heights in Sydney across to South Australia, and then park it temporarily above ground while they work out what to do with it longer term. Keen for people's thoughts about whether South Australia should support such a move. Maybe David, your view first, and then Francis, and then Adla.
Not gonna lie, nuclear waste terrifies me. Hey, like nuclear power, I have a lot of progressive friends that are smart, and I dare say smarter than me, and they think that nuclear power is a fantastic way to go in terms of just solving our energy crisis as such. I disagree with them. I disagree with them heavily. We've seen Fukushima, which was meant to be a very safe nuclear plant, and we saw what happened to that. I might be proven wrong here, but it's a little bit like when you hop on an airplane and you know that your chances of dying is far less than when you get in a car, but you still hop on the airplane and immediately think of how you can die. That's nuclear power to me. I don't think we should touch it. I don't think we should touch its waste. Also, like, just to spruik the sort of part where this one is somewhat relevant to the AJP, we found a study, or we didn't find a study, I found a study that effectively said if the whole world was relying on nuclear power from about 2018, that would still have about the same effect as if the whole world adopted a plant-based diet. So I think there are better ways to go when it comes to our power, i.e. cleaner sources and reducing agriculture. And I think keep nuclear out of SA. Hey.
Thanks, David. Francis.
I think the sad part is that the feds pushed this so far down the road here in South Australia. It's almost been like a con when you think about it. And the fact that the community was engaged and it's caused so much division in the community is another issue. I mean, my immediate thought is we don't need it. We have to hurry up and organise other sustainable ways of power and storage and all the rest of it. The problem we still have is the medical waste and the fact that it's all over the place. But I just think it was a con job from the beginning. I mean, South Australia was always going to be the patsy. What I don't understand is why we paid for the Royal Commission, which I thought was really terrible, because that was the feds looking for their own way out. And we were, again, conned into doing that because we were promised all these wonderful jobs that were going to be the future. So I don't want to see nuclear at all. And the fact that we have nuclear subs coming, although they may never happen, let's be honest. I mean, it's so far down the road, it wouldn't matter. But if we can't think of other ways, and we're seeing now in Ukraine that it's just the biggest problem that they've got. Not if I can help it.
Great, thanks, Frances. And Adla?
Yeah, we're opposed to this. I think there's so many issues with it. You know, the first big one is obviously that the traditional owners, the Bangala people, weren't properly consulted in this. Frances mentioned the fracture in the community over this, and we just know that it's just not a safe place, that land is really special, and what will happen if it's there is that waste will leak into the land, to the water and towns and cities, and I don't think it's fair. It's also in the heart of our food bowl, and it will affect our grain export industry. It's just not a good idea, and we know that Jay Weatherall consulted the state about nuclear and nuclear system. It's actually really unfortunate that the federal government has ignored the people of South Australia who clearly said we didn't want it. There was quite a lot of consultation around it. So for me and for our party, we'll keep fighting this because we're against nuclear.
Great, thanks, Adla. And the last question I got on my list is around World Heritage listing of the Great Australian Bight. So if you remember a couple of years ago, there was a big push to open it up for oil and gas, and there was a massive community response, which led to a range of oil companies walking away from drilling for oil. Now there is a push on for a World Heritage listing. The SA Parliament or SA government has to have the first step of support before the federal government can nominate it to the World Heritage body. So it is essential that the state has a clear view on it. So yeah, keen for each of your thoughts around whether South Australia should support World Heritage listing of the Great Australian Bight. I might start with you, David.
I am not at all qualified to answer this question straight up. You mentioned words like world and heritage listing, and I immediately think, yay, that's a good thing, but I am straight up not at all qualified. I would ask one favor of you though. I have a colleague / running partner in the AJP, Matt Pastro, who'll be doing a forum with you guys in the next few days for Elder. He is our aficionado on all things sea, and I would also love to hear his response to this question because it would inform me greatly as well. But should basic sort of messaging around, I don't know, I would consult with experts, and I would lean towards whatever is the greatest for protecting marine life and the planet. But yeah.
Thank you, David. And Adla, your thoughts?
Definitely, the Greens have been leading the way to give the Great Australian Bight World Heritage listing, and it was part of a very successful campaign before the federal election and made that a real focus for people. And we saw many community groups, many conservation groups come together to save the Bight. It is so precious that we need to protect it. Protecting it is good for tourism, it's good for jobs, it's good for the Bight, and it's good for the state. There's absolutely no social license for drilling in the Bight, and the Labor and Liberal parties need to support the heritage listing of it.
Great. And Frances?
Yeah, it's a no-brainer, really. During the debate around it some years ago, it was pretty hard that some of the unions came out in support of it because of the mining and the jobs, and which I think is, again, a bit of a con. We have this job carrot dangled in front of us, and we all have to go, oh, jobs over here, nuclear, jobs over here, mining, jobs over here. It's like the Great Barrier Reef. You can twist all the data any way you like and pretend mining's not going to make a difference, but it is. And, you know, there's no way you can dress it up. An oil rig is a problem, and only one thing has to go wrong and you've lost everything. So me personally, totally opposed to it. But I guess it gets back to our transition thing, doesn't it, that we talked about very early in the piece. It's all about making profit, and that profit from mining in the Bight is not sustainable. It's just nuts. So World Heritage Listing, bring it on and see how fast we can stop all that other talk.
Great. All right, that comes to the end of our questions. So now give you an opportunity to just give a short summary statement, just to what would you like the voters to be left with in terms of your thoughts around nature and climate. And I'll go in reverse order. So Francis, then David, and then finishing up with Adla. So over to you, Francis, your closing statement.
Right. Well, I think everything we've talked about tonight has been terrifically inspiring, and it's great that this sort of these issues are brought up, because at the moment the election's the talk isn't about these things. So I'm not sure if I've missed any big campaign announcements around environment, but they're keeping them to the last minute, and they may be the doozies that we're all waiting to hear. But our green space is precious. The lifestyle up this side of town, the northeast and the Hills Face Zone, is amazing. We have Anstey's Hill, but we also have that little remnant scrub at Ango Scrub. We have amazing history through Indigenous people, with Tea Tree Gully being settled in 1839. We have all these wonderful things at our disposal, and we need to be doing everything we can to enhance the green space. I think our children, and way back to where we had the big promotion of leave nothing but your footprint, those days are back with us. And the answer, I think, as Adla touched on really early in the beginning, is with young people, because they're the ones, if we can get them thinking about this and working on their oldies or their parents, we know things will change. But we also need some really good leadership at government level. All the things that we've talked about, I think, are just so important. You know, obviously electrification of transport's the next big thing, but it's about, again, transitioning it so that everyone can afford it and be part of the solution rather than part of the problem. So great initiatives that we've spoken about tonight. I think the stopping of land clearing, all those sorts of things that we can do little things. I think the big thing is to find two big things that we can do and four smaller things that we can work on straight away and start chipping away, rather than trying to eat the elephant completely. We do it a bite at a time and get started on it now as soon as we can. So thank you for the opportunity. I think it's been great.
Thank you, Francis. David, your concluding statement.
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone. This has been fantastic, and I'm left with just fond thoughts of both you, Francis, and Adler, and the policies, and have nothing but faith in any one of you too. From a specifically spruiking myself and sort of like just going out on a big statement. 20 years ago, we only had to make small changes to protect our lives and our way of life from climate change and the need of massive adaptations. Currently, we only have to make moderate changes, but we are definitely tracking in a terrible direction. If we don't start implementing changes now, adaptation is going to be forced upon us, and it's going to be horrible, and it is going to massively change our lives, the lives of our children as well. I recognize I'm very fresh to politics, but my ideas and my hopes, they haven't been dashed yet. And I think it's possibly exactly what we need, that sort of thing. I would mention, though, that even if the AJP got all of our upper and lower house candidates through, which is pretty unlikely if you know anything about politics, but we are giving it a red hot go. And Australia does love itself an underdog story, and we love our vision for South Australia. Even if this happens, and the other two candidates here are probably in the same boat, we will have to work with Labor or the Liberals. So it's a little bit disappointing that we didn't see either of them here today. But at the same time, we're going to get their policies splashed all over the news anyway. So Yeah. Fingers crossed, guys. Fingers crossed. Hopefully they care enough to show up when it comes to policy. And certainly us three do. So congrats, have fun, and good luck.
Thanks, David. And last but not least, Adla.
This state election is an exciting opportunity, and it's a time for the Greens to look. We're hoping to get the balance of power, and what that means is that we'll be able to work with whoever's in government to push them harder and faster towards action on climate change. And it's time for us to address that. Currently, our state parliament is serving the needs of big developers, big corporations, and big banks. So we really need to look at capping donations, and I was really happy to see that the Labor leader has said that he's going to do that. So we'll wait and see if that's something to do. This is such a beautiful spot to live in, Newland. I work with young people every day, and they deserve a future. And it's really interesting listening to them. They're reading the IPC report. They're getting angry about it, and they're wanting to make change. Many of them are vegan from very, as soon as they can make that choice, they're making it because they know it's helping the planet. They buy clothes from op shops because we know that fast fashion is also another thing that's for landfill. They're having clothing swaps. So I have so much hope for our future, because I know our young people get it, and they want and deserve a future full of hope. So for me, this is an opportunity for us as a state to make decisions based to give those people hope. And we need to act now, and we know that we can do that.
Great. Thank you so much. Well, that comes to the end of the forum. I really appreciate your time. It's Saturday night, it's the Fringe, it's the festival, there's a lot going on, but you're putting your time and your effort into talking to your community and talking about issues which are incredibly important in this state election. So we really appreciate your commitment for being here. As I said before, we will endeavour to share this as widely as we can in the Newland electorate, because we think it's really important voters hear about what candidates' views are around these issues. So thank you so much. We really appreciate your time, and we wish you all the very, very best with your campaigns for the next 2 weeks and beyond.
Thank you
again. Yeah.
Bye. Bye,
Thank you,
Adla. Bye, David.
Thank you, Francis. Thank you,
Thank
David.
you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks.
See you.
Lovely.
Thank you.